Alright, so my name is Preston Bernier, and I will be talking about Franz Joseph Haydn and his Symphony number 85, which also is, I will also be talking specifically about the first movement of that. So Joseph Haydn was born March 31st in 1732 in Rohrau, Austria. His mother and his father were working folk and they didn't have a lot of money. He also had 5 siblings on top of that, so supporting the whole family was kind of difficult. But at the same time, Haydn was pretty good in the music and understood music a lot better than the entire family. So his parents agreed to send him to Hamburg, which was an offer that his cousin gave him. Excuse me. His cousin came to Rohrau and offered to take Haydn in with him in Hamburg, Austria, and have Haydn study and learn music from him and others, because his cousin was the music director and principal in Hamburg. While he was in Hamburg studying and singing in the choir, George von Rauter discovered him and recruited him at age 8 to sing in the choir at St. Stephen's Chapel in Vienna, which was a very big hot spot for music and musicians, so that was a blessing for Haydn to be able to have that opportunity. Unfortunately, as Haydn got older, his voice matured, so he was kicked out of the choir because they no longer wanted his voice, and he ended up having to freelance on his own as a musician, which kind of had him struggling financially. He did many strange jobs, but also musical jobs. He was a music teacher, but also sometimes was a valet, and just all of these sorts of things. But eventually, after a few jobs and many jobs and whatever, he was freelancing for about 8 years. He ended up being employed by Count Morzin as a Kapellmeister, which ended up being his first full-time employment job. And a Kapellmeister is a music director. So he worked there for a little bit, but unfortunately, pretty soon after he started working there, Count Morzin started struggling financially, so they had to close the doors, and Haydn once again no longer had a job. However, luckily, Haydn found a job because the prince of the Esterhazy family, which was one of the most wealthy families in Austria, offered him a job as a assistant Kapellmeister for the head Kapellmeister. The head Kapellmeister at the time was getting pretty old, so they hired Haydn to replace him, essentially, once his time had come. So he worked here at the Esterhazy family for 30 years until his death, and that was a very long career for Haydn, and he loved working for them because they gave him lots of freedom to compose whatever he wanted and work with people and do lots of jobs. He was the music director, but also did a lot of other stuff on top of that. So while he was working there, he was composing a bunch, and he composed symphonies and string quartets, and that actually ended up dubbing him the name of the father of string quartets, and on top of that, the father of symphonies, which is a pretty important title to have. And he ended up being one of the developers of classical music. He's very important to the classical period.